Right. Oh my goodness. Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Straight Couch Talk podcast with Rachel and Erik. We are doing part two of Skeletons in the Closet. So if you haven't watched the last episode, go to our page and watch that so you can get caught up. So what we're going to really focus on today is, I guess, like the pointers of skeletons in the closet. And um, we wrote down a list here of things that I guess we kind of went through with the steps with skeletons and putting that out, our own skeletons in the closet. So to kind of start with this, what came to mind when we were just talking was so I grew up dancing in ballet at Oregon Ballet Theater and then danced at many different companies. And through that, the last company I've been dancing with for many years, Polaris Dance Theater, under direction of Robert Gatrone, he has taught me just a lot about relationships, just within dance. And the reason why I want to bring this up, because it kind of goes into what we're going to be talking about here. And the biggest thing that with partnering with dance that Robert always talks about is that when you have a new partner, you have to be vulnerable. You have to give your all. You have to put everything out on the table. And why this is important is, especially like for in dance, for instance, and you can apply this to so many other things of professions and even friendships and families and things like that. But there, you have to start with this trust, and it's this give and take. And when you're dancing with someone, if one person is giving 100% and the other person is only giving 50%, there starts to become this imbalance that starts happening. And then there starts to be a lack of trust that can happen, because if, like, say for instance with me, if I'm giving 100% and Erik's my partner over here and he's only giving me 50%, so therefore I end up holding back, and it doesn't allow me to be able to perform at my full capacity and at my best, because I'm kind of leery, like, okay, if we go into this lift or we're going to go into this next movement here, then, and if I can't give you all my weight, then you could possibly drop me. Then there's a whole uh, like domino effect of things that can happen. And then all of a sudden, what if where he wasn't performing at 100%, then all of a sudden, or like with me, I'm going to reverse it. So say he's performing 100% and I'm only going 50 and I'm only giving him half of my weight. And then all of a sudden I decide, I'm going to give him all my weight. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's not expecting it. He wasn't expecting the weight. He wasn't prepared at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, we fall. And then actually it ends up being my fault that we fell, because I wasn't committing 100% and I was only committing 50%. And therefore, when it came to that next step, because I didn't give my all, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm like, I'm going to give my all. Then all of a sudden, it starts this domino effect. And so I wanted Erik to also talk about this too from a military aspect, because in military training, it's the same type of thing. You have to have that relationships, and you have to create those relationships with each other in your squad, or else you're not going to fully be able to trust that person. And if you go out into combat, then if this person over here is not performing at 100%, then how are you going to be able to trust and know that they've really got your back when it comes to that? So I know you had some things that you wanted to share on that.
Right. Thanks. So when it comes to that piece and it comes down to the training piece, there's a lot of training that always happens. And then at the end of it, I'll tie it into a relationship and you'll see how it's similar, but just different stories. So when you're going through training, and you're going through preparation to deploy, you train as if you fight. That's so that way you know what each person is capable of, what their limits are. So now if someone is holding back in training, you base all of your plans and you place all of your missions off of the training and how things are being executed. So if someone's not performing fully, that can really mess up the mission because then they'll over excel and it can throw the mission out of whack. And it may not. Um, and one of the things to make an example of it is in one of my duty stations, I was in a position to where I was gonna get in trouble because I wasn't a yes man. I didn't agree with a lot of the things the command always had to do. And there was a lot of people who were yes sir, no sergeant major, yes sir, and I was not one of those. And I was facing trouble, UCMJ, which is Uniform Code of Military Justice for the military guys, was Article 15, which is non-judicial punishment. While they do the reading, you have the option to accept it or decline it and go to court martial. Well, during the reading, my squad came in and stood in front of me and told both the commander and the sergeant major that if they were going to give me an Article 15, they had to give all of them an Article 15 also. They've never seen that. They started hooping and hollering and yelling at that time. And they told all of us essentially to get out with some not so friendly words. Few weeks passed, they moved me to a different unit within the same battalion, but just different unit, and that's why I fell apart. They because the cohesion wasn't there. So now to tie that into a relationship, you have to have a good cohesive relationship with your significant other because if you don't, you guys will fall apart. And when it comes to relationships, just like the military, when you tell your team or squad or battery, battalion, whatever, when you tell them something, they're going to hold you to it. So it's just like with your significant other. When you tell him or her something, they're trusting you and they're banking on that what you say you're going to do. And when you don't do that, you create a rift of problems or second and third in order effects that fall into that. And when all that stuff doesn't really need to happen, if you just are open and you just stand by what you do. And if you can't follow through with what you do, just have a good reason why, but don't make it an excuse either. Acknowledge the failure, but say why you couldn't complete it and then how you will complete it. Because now when you present a problem, you have to present a solution. You just can't have a problem just sitting there because then it's just going to be there. Now, if you need help with the solution, that's where you and your partner can sit down and work with a solution, but try your best to have a problem and a solution. So then that way now it shows the person you're with or even with a job that, hey, this happened. This didn't get done, but here's what I'm going to do to fix it. So that way then we can move on and progress and then your relationship can actually be better because now you both established that communication back and forth with each other.
Sweet. So with that, it goes into the next thing is like vulnerability. So it's so important to be vulnerable and it's scary and I'm not, it wasn't easy and it's not easy being vulnerable, but at the same time, when we can be vulnerable, especially about our past and things, it allows us to be able to work through things. So if you're like, say you're in a new relationship, this is the most important part to be vulnerable in that point in time, because when you can be vulnerable and allow the skeletons in the closet to come out, then two things can happen. It allows, from a healthy point of view, it allows the other person that you could be starting to date with or connect with, it allows that person to either say, okay, I can handle this, I can handle your story, and they'll start seeing a different point of view of you and understanding how to love you and how to treat you and help you. Or you allow them to respectfully be able to say, you know what, this is just too much for me, and I know myself and I don't want to damage you, I don't want to hurt you down the road, so I'm going to be respectful in a way of, this is just, I just can't do this, and this isn't right for me, and this isn't the right fit. And it's okay. It happens all the time, but that's also part of dating and putting yourself out there. And it's just like with dance. You know how many times I get partnered with people over and over, different time. You could have the same choreography, and but each experience with each person is going to be different. And not only that, one may work over here that may not work over there. And eventually you'll start finding somebody that you actually have that same language with and you can connect and work with. And it starts to become a beautiful thing. But within that, there's so many different partners we go through. So like in life, we there's so many partners and things that we go through. And I like if I like in my past, I with my previous relationships, I was vulnerable and I did put everything out on the table. And, you know, some of them couldn't handle it and some of them tried to. But at the same time, I was giving 100 and they were giving 50 or 25. So either, you know, although I was being vulnerable and transparent, um, they weren't. And so as time goes on, all of these skeletons in their closet started coming out, and then it started causing problems. And then by that point, we're, you know, a couple years into the relationship, and then that's when all of the skeletons come out, and then it causes this domino ripple effect that, you know, is almost insalvable. Like you can't really save that at that point. It ends up you end up going separate ways. Cheating starts happening. Or like with me, I just couldn't handle it anymore and didn't like not having the, you know, the 100% on both sides. And so I end up going my way because it wasn't an equal match to me. So it's really important to be vulnerable up front and to share that. So your experiences and things, and, you know, it is scary, and you know rejection is, you know, something, but at the same time that's where self-love comes in and self-respect, because if you have that self-love and self-respect for yourself, then you're not going to have hard feelings when that person says I can't handle it. You're going to go and do is like, okay, you're not my matchmaker, next. And love yourself enough instead of being like, oh, he didn't love me enough, or I'm not beautiful enough that, you know, he didn't want to go through this with me, or she didn't want to. And instead of being like, all right, this just saved me a bunch of heartache from the future, and now I can just move on and there's no hard feelings. And so that's also, you know, the next thing is like being transparent. And you know, I know that was difficult for you to be transparent and vulnerable. um, I had to really push him in the beginning to be vulnerable and transparent with me, but at the same time, you have to create a safe space. And that's, you know, there's all these different languages that we could talk through of love languages, not like I'm meaning like actual cultural languages. I'm talking about different ways of talking. And, you know, being able to figure out what those languages are for each other as well. Is there anything that comes to your mind that you want to talk on?
Um, not really a lot. I mean, just with the transparency and vulnerability, it was just hard because I didn't want to, and this will tie into something we talk about here in a little bit. It was the fear of judgment. Um, Things are going, you know, pretty good, but then you're afraid of being judged, and then you're afraid that'll change the course of a relationship when they find out what you got hiding in there. And that was difficult for me because I liked Rachel a lot, and I was like, oh, well, I told her a lot of it, but there was still some that was still kind of was like I was ashamed of personally myself that I was working through. And that's where she asked the right questions and it got the answers, and I was just like, well, if it is, it is. And I just kind of just I dumped it all. I didn't have a choice really. Well, I did have a choice, but I just was like, well, here it is, and this is it. And then that's when it all happened at the zoo, is when I kind of just threw everything. And now it's just easier, especially with things that go on daily. Now I just let her know anything that was really going on. Excuse me, because I'm not really I know that there will be no judgment there. Um, I would just say anything. Hey, this is what's going on, and she may need a moment. She may step outside. She may do whatever she needs to do, but I know that she just has to process it, and I have to allow her that time to do that. And it's important that you all do the same thing when you do that. Is allow your uh, we'll say significant other, will allow your significant other to process. And that was hard for me because I'm so used to question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, back and forth, because that's how we do in the military. When we talk about stuff, it's right there. Pop, 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 answer, answer. If you don't have the answer within a few seconds, push the question aside. It stays over here to the left, and then we get back to it later on. And now I'm learning to just allow that process time, because not everyone processes the same way when you ask questions. Some people need a moment to process, so that way they don't say the wrong thing in answering out of emotions versus out of thought, where you can actually think about your answers.
Or not only that, just fear, because sometimes, see, this is where the self awareness comes in, because sometimes things will come up and I really have to be self aware of my own triggers. And this is the other thing, is the self awareness and triggers I have down here. And what that is that, even though, say, we put all the skeletons in the closet, okay, we put it all on the table, but as time goes on, with that being out there still comes triggers. And just because you talk about it, and maybe you did do healing work. So, like with me, I did a lot of healing work with my traumas. But at the same time, I started to realize that there's only certain, you can do a lot of healing, but there's healing that has to happen within a relationship in order to heal those traumas. And the only way that you can heal those things and those triggers is actually being in a relationship and working through it together. And I was talking to one of my friends about this the other day, because it's so true and it's important. So we could be going along, and then all of a sudden, um, something happens, and I get triggered, and it's not usually. So, like for me, I used to be gaslit a lot. I was in narcissistic relationships, and so I got to a point of reacting. And so when something would happen, I would just react. And then by the time words are coming out of my mouth, I'm like, oh crap, I can't stop it. And the truth is coming out, but it's coming out in a very, very harsh, mean way that is like knives stabbing from my words. And I knew that my words were powerful and would hurt them and cut right through them with the truth. And that's where also respect comes in, because I told him, I said, I have respect for you, and I'm not going for me, I have to work through gaslighting and I have to work through reacting. So I have to come through a different approach. I have to step away for a moment. I need to rethink. I have, I thought, I'm like, obviously, I thought I took care of this problem, but it's coming up right now. So now I need to go take care of this. So then I go do a healing session on myself, and do body coding, and I release those things, or I go journal, or I go sit and pray, and or I sit and I talk about it right away. And I'm like, this is what's going on. This is the trauma. This is the trigger. I thought that I had, dealt with this and healed from it, but apparently I didn't. So that's where we start going into problem solving, and we start going through, is there certain things that come up to your mind?
Mhm. With that one, I think with the triggers part was with divorce yesterday and the legal stuff that I got to do. It was hard for you. You got frustrated at some points, and because of what I'm paying and things like that, and uh, we had to really talk through that. I know.
Yeah. So that was like my thing, was like I got mad yesterday, and it wasn't really at him, it was just the whole justice system, and really just I got pissed off that, you have all of these narcissistic, abusive people that take advantage of kind-hearted people and like use the justice system in a way to literally rape, people with money out of greed and entitlement. That's a huge thing, is an entitlement. I see this entitlement people have. And then I look back at my divorce and I didn't ask a penny. I could have got spouse support. I could have gone after money that he had no money to go after, but I could have done something to try to screw him over even more financially. But for me, it was like, why do I want to have those ties to somebody and um, just move on and be successful myself? And I don't need I don't need somebody to take care of me for the rest of my life. I can do it myself. But yeah, it'd be nice to have a partner to do that with, but at the same time, it's like I don't need it. So I was frustrated yesterday because of the system and how she's literally just like getting everything. So yeah, we did have to work through that and talk through those things. But also like with me, it with some things, it just takes time. I just need a moment of time to just let it go. And there's only certain things we have control over of, and we can waste our energy in those things that we don't have control, and we can let our minds go crazy and run us crazy and then make us depressed and frustrated and things like that. Or we can realize that, okay, we don't have control over this, so we'll just let it go. But I do have control over this. I do have control over my own, health and thoughts and what's going on in my life. And so, and that could go to so many different things. And so, yeah, it was, yesterday was difficult on that aspect because of I it just irks me when I see good people getting abused and taken advantage of, and people get away with it. But then I also have that's when you have to surrender to creator and go, okay, this is on you, creator. It's not my judgment. It's not my place to judge. It's not I don't sit in that seat. So I always remind myself too that when it comes to those people, some way or another, they'll have to stand before creator and they'll have to deal with, what their wrongdoings. And not every, you may think that someone gets away with something on this earth, but when it goes into the next life, you'll stand before the creator in that judgment day and nobody will get away with anything. So that's part of that.
I think too with that also is how you convey the message also instead of you it's how you can how you pass that message to the person who is struggling. Like for this situation we're talking about is I had to just acknowledge the fact that that's what it was, and at the end, and as I look at it, I see it as a, I'm taking care of the kids because she's not right now. I'm providing because she's not. And later on in life, they'll see. And that people told me that, and I've had to learn that too. And that's kind of what it was. And then like how Rachel said that when it comes time to answer for, you know, those things, there there's no one gonna be there except you and God. And you it's gonna be a one-way conversation with questions because he's gonna ask you, why were you acting this way when this person was being nice to you? Yes, they made mistakes, but you're supposed to accept that and be nice back, and you weren't. Why? And he's not gonna want to hear your reasons or excuses why, because that's not what he's about, and that's not what it's about. It's about like, it's about forgiveness. It's about not forgetting, but forgive, and then kind of just not saying be best friends, but you kind of no disrespect. There shouldn't be none, and that's kind of the message that he carries with a lot of things is treat others the way you want to be treated.
Right. And that's the other thing that goes into is like having no expectations. And so that's like the hugest thing. I used to have high expectations. And going into this relationship, I decided to actually throw all expectations out the window. And by doing that, it allowed for surprises and things to happen. Um, for instance, like, um, I never had an expectation of, him really helping me clean the house or even just do the dishes. And all of a sudden, he just started like doing the dishes. I didn't have to ask. And I didn't have the expectation of that. And when he started doing that, it was like, oh, wow, thank you. It became more appreciative to do that. And he's like, "Oh, well, I should have to do this." And I'm like, "You don't have to do anything. I don't expect it." And when I noticed a shift in him when he was like, "Oh, she doesn't expect it." And there's all these different things I could talk about, but there it's really not having that expectation. And when you don't have expectations, then it allows for um things to spontaneously happen, and acts of kindness to happen. Um, and when that happens, you're just like, oh, thank you. Like, I really appreciate that. And, it makes things nicer uh, to handle.
Right. And I think the one thing that was for me a lot too was is the when you said like, thank you for doing that, I was like, what? Like, said thank you. I've never been told that before. Like it was just dishes. I like doing them anyway. I like doing dishes. I don't know what it is about it. I just like doing them. I like picking up dishes and vacuuming. But she all the time says thank you, and it definitely sets a good energy vibe when you do that. And try it. People listening, try it. Try it tonight. Look at me in my eyes right here. Hey, this is a direct order. Your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend does something, just tell them, hey, thanks for doing that. Watch the reaction they get. They're probably going to be caught off guard because you never told them that before. And they're going to be like, what? And then now watch a smile come up where you can feel the energy and they'll be like, oh, told me thank you. That's kind of cool. But just watch how it goes. And then watch that. And if you're doing that, go for you. Keep doing it. Don't stop it because it keeps the positivity going. And now I never used to say it either because I never did it. But now I do it all the time. She made some stuff earlier today, food. I said, oh, hey, thanks for making that. And she just smiles. And I like to see her smile. And it'll make your other person smile. And then a smile is infectious. One person smiles, then another person smiles. And it's just smiles all around. I mean, and then now you're in a happy home, and that's what you want. That whole stigma with, oh, happy wife, happy life. No, it should be happy home. So that way you're both happy, not just one person. Because if one person's happy and one person's miserable, then it's just a miserable, shitty home, and it's just the happy. That's all it really is. It's just a happy home. There's no happy one person. It should be happy two people.
Right. Well, and that's, with the food thing too, that's a whole nother thing. Like, at the beginning of the relationship, I was like, don't expect me to cook. I stopped cooking. I barely cook. And the reason why is because of the trauma that happened from my ex-husband and his daughters, and how I was treated. I didn't want to cook anymore. So I told him, I said, don't expect that from me. I'm not going to cook. So if I do cook, then, it's, know that it's coming from a good place, and that I'm healing, because that's something that, I used to love doing, was cooking. And then it was kind of like something that I love doing was kind of taken and turned into something that was like a slavery thing to do. And so just even me cooking, it's like it's for him. He doesn't expect it. So when I do cook, it's a surprise. And
I cook.
yeah, he's the one that cooks. But see, that's the thing. That's part of being able to work through that trauma together. Because he understood why I didn't want to cook and the things like that. And so he said, okay, well, I can help you with there. So how about I'll cook, And when you get to those moments in time where you feel like you can cook again, then you can do that, but there's no pressure. And I got you, and we can, we'll work through this. And so that's where, part of that trauma, where we've been able to work through. And it's been a year, and I'm just now starting to cook again every once in a while. It's
I asked her today, and she said, "Yeah," and there was a hesitant, but I was hungry, and we had stuff from yesterday, and she made a little creation, which was good. So she kind of mixed and concocted a thing, and it was really, really good.
I call it my res food.
It was good though, but I asked her to do it. I was like, "Well, let me give this a shot and let me see," because she made the offer yesterday, and it was coming around 12:01, and I was like, "Hey, can you make what you said you were going to do yesterday by chance?" And I didn't say like, "Hey, you have to do it because you said." I left it and said, "Hey, by chance." So now that leaves it open if she's going to do it or not. So I didn't tell her to do it. I just asked her nicely. And if she wouldn't have, okay, cool. I'd have figured it out and threw something on the pan and did something, but she did. And that just shows the progression of what she's doing and how she's healing with the cooking aspect.
Right. And then that's when I realized, I was like, okay, I need new pots and pans. So I messaged my mom and I was like, okay, I found out what I want for Christmas. So mom, I know you're watching right now. So I need new pots and pans, please.
Rachel Ray.
Rachel, oh, he wants Rachel Ray. That's what he's been talking about. So, but see, that's the other thing too, is like with bring my mom in, it's right. She, acts of kindness, she has worked for 35 years. And that's, she's been married for 35 years. And I I can honestly say I have never seen my parents really argue and fight. I have seen them get in disagreements, and I've seen my mom kind of like snap at my dad, a little bit, but that's a Shoshone woman for you. And but still, it was in a way of love. It was never in a way of abuse. And so go real quick, like going through my relationships, I think that was one of the biggest things why I fought so hard in my relationships, is because I saw what my parents had in their marriage. And I'm like looking at my relationships and going, this is not what my parents have. This is not what real love looks like. This is not love. And it's abuse. But I understand I had to go through those abusive relationships, or I wouldn't be here talking to you all today, and I wouldn't be in this healthier relationship right now. So my parents have really exemplified that friendship, talking, communicating with each other, acts of kindness, and really appreciating each other and working together. And I've always seen them work as a team, even at times when my mom, was homeschooling us and got to be a stay-at-home mom. There still was this teamwork, and that happened inside and outside of the home. And it wasn't this like, you have to work or you have to be at home. It was a choice on both parts, that there was that mutual respect. And that goes into the next thing of, is having that respect. And when you're talking, it kind of there's a couple of things that all talk both going together here, is you know having the active listening, self-awareness, and then having that open mind with the respect and no judgment when you talk. And if you can have these things, then it these are like key things that help you go into healthy conversations without arguing and fighting, and being able to really sit and listen to each other. And one of the biggest things I see out here is people are talking and they're over here, I'm really active and I'm talking and I'm listening to you. And, but I'm just going to go over here and play on this. But, I'm listening to you and I understand what you're saying and I hear you, but I'm going to, so you see what I'm saying? It's like I see everybody in their phones instead of actually like having engaged conversation and talking. And it was like even this with our first date, I put my phone away And every time I was with him, I put my phone away. And I would even, sometimes I would put it on vibrate and just put it away. That way he knew that I was engaged and listening to him. I wasn't listening and you go, yeah, I'm listening. And oh, what's my friend doing over here? Oh yeah, oh, I'm gonna see how many followers I have now, or oh, this person. Oh wait, yeah, And so I see this all the time, and you're not actively engaging with each other. And when that happens, um, you shut down. The person talking shuts down. And it's like, I saw this a while ago, even for instance, at one of the boot camps that I was doing a while ago. One of the leaders, she was sitting there on her phone. And while we were doing talking circle, she was literally sitting on her phone and going, "Oh yeah, okay, And she was just constantly you know what? Just I'm listening to you. I'm good at multitasking and listening and doing things at the same time, and I'm really listening to you." And but I'm like looking at her and I'm like, "How are you actually listening to people when you're engaged on your phone and you're doing something else while you're trying to think somewhere else?" And she was creating content. And so it's like, your mind was active somewhere else, not engaged in these people that are telling their life stories and things like that. And so I started realizing and watching the body languages of everyone that was talking. And at first she would be engaged with them and looking at them, but then all of a sudden after about 1 minute she's bam, looking right at her phone. And I would watch each one of these models go and talk. And the moment that she started looking at her phone, all of a sudden each one kind of started kind of like becoming more internal. And but until it was like I really even made myself more actively engaged with them and kept that eye contact with them, then and did the active listening, then all of a sudden I saw them shift, and then they were able to actually start engaging again and talking again, and they weren't shutting down. So it's the same thing in relationships, friendships, family. Put your phones down, people. Engage, listen. You're going to be sorry one day when that person's gone and you sit back and go, "Oh, I wish I would have actually had conversation with them instead of just sitting on my phone the entire time looking at Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is." Um, you're you miss out on these opportunities. Children, you miss out on opportunities with your children when you're paying attention to social media and your phone and you're not even actively engaging and listening with your children. They listen and they watch you and they learn from you. So what are you showing them? And then not only that, in your relationships, what are you showing your children? Because like with me, I saw outside friends, with abusive parents and unhealthy relationships. And then I saw, healthy parents and a relationship and so even though I went down my own road, that's a whole nother story, and that goes through my generational trauma. Um, but you know, I I have to you have to be actively listening and engaged with your kids. It's not just, that's the thing about relationships in this podcast. It's not just about an actual relationship with someone. You can put this information into anything with any type of relationship, business, family, friends, children, your siblings even. It doesn't just have to be a relationship. These things go to anyone, and especially if you want a best friend, you're gonna have to be vulnerable and transparent with your best friend to be able to be a best friend. How are you going to be able to have each other's backs if you're not vulnerable and go through these things? So I think that's like one of the biggest things too is put your phones down, be active, be engaged. And you know it really does make a difference, even like with me when I'm trying to talk to somebody and they're actively on their phone. Then I start withholding information. I start to um disengage. And I'm like, well, they're not really really wanting to hear what I have to say right now, or else they would really have eyes on me. They would put their phone down, and then I stopped talking. And they're like, "Oh, but I was listening to you." And I'm like, "Oh, what was I saying? Oh, I think you were saying something about what was it again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you weren't listening. You were engaged in your phone." So, that's, I think, some of the biggest things is, those the active listening being, and then self-awareness is huge. Knowing your triggers, problem solving and being able to work through those together. But then the other thing too is having the ability to say sorry, and really meaning that when you say sorry that you really mean it, but at the same time saying it from your heart. So like I was always taught from my mom, don't say sorry unless you really mean it. And so sometimes people would be like, well, you need to say you're sorry. And I would have to tell them, and I said, you know what, I will say I'm sorry, but I need to go over here and think about things right now, because you're telling me to say I'm sorry, and if I say I'm sorry right now, I'm not meaning it, and then I'm not really sorry. So, but that also, again, that goes back to having that self awareness. That goes back to having, that open mind and respect, and being able to call yourself out on your own stuff and go, okay, I did do this. This was my fault. I did, I'm sorry. I really did not mean to say this or react in this way. Um, but make that right. But then at the same time, you got to work on not repeating that, and work on moving forward. Because if you repeat it again, like I was always taught in the native way, then you're not really sorry.
Yeah. I know for me, uh, that was a harder thing for me growing up because I never really had to, I not necessarily had to say it, but it was just a hard thing to do. And even with past relationships, it was a hard thing to do to even say it because the times when I said it and I meant it, it was crushed. Or and when you apologize and mean it, the response that almost should come back is that it's either accepted or it's not. And if it's not accepted, you can't shut down and be like, oh, and then fall apart. You said you were sorry. And if they don't accept it, that's them. But you at least know you said you were sorry and you meant it. And if you crush the other person when they're apologizing to you, they're not going to apologize no more, and they're not going to be sorry for when they do something. But like Rachel said, you can't sorry it only goes so far. You have to put action behind the sorry too and show that hey, you're not going to do it again. So I mean, we don't really say sorry too much, but when we do, we know it's meant, and it's an actual, it's a sincere, we're talking, we're close, and we're like, really, really in a close proximity, so that way you can feel the energy of the apology, so that way you know it's sincere and you know it's legit. And I know she won't crush me with it because she knows I really am sorry. And I've said it a couple of times, I think. I think you have too.
Mhm.
But uh and that's the healthy way to do it. When you go through that ability of saying sorry, and it takes time. It's like it's but and then that ties into being vulnerable again. You have to be vulnerable to say it, and you have to take it with the acceptance or the not. And when it comes to the sorry part.
Well, and not only that, that also then goes to forgiveness on the other part, because then that's, if that person comes to you and says you're sorry, then, I mean, you can choose to not forgive them, but it's better to forgive, and it's healthier to forgive. Even like with me too, it's like I talk a lot about with others, forgiving your enemy and those who have wronged you. And it doesn't make it right, but it saves you a lot of trauma to go through, trapped emotions. It can cause, and go into cancer by holding those things in. I can speak from that personally. Um, and but forgiveness is huge. But once you do forgive, then it's not that you just forgive and you forget it. It's I'm not saying you have to forget, but when you forgive, you move on and you let it go. And if you, because this has happened to me before, where okay, yeah, you forgive, but then later down the road, and the same thing with you, then all of a sudden, boom, that trauma is thrown back in in your face from like 3 years ago or like 10 months ago, and boom, that is somehow brought back up and thrown in your face, and you're like sideswiped because you're like, wait, I thought you forgave me. So then did you not really forgive me because you've been holding on to it this whole entire time? And you've been, now there's resentment that's caused. And so that's a huge thing is, there's the being sorry, the apology, but then on the other side is having the forgiveness in your heart too, and letting it go. And that's where also trust comes in, and trusting that, okay, we solved this, we problem solved this, we talked through this. Now I'm going to trust this thing isn't going to happen again. But at the same time, we are human. So if it does happen again, then obviously we didn't learn our lesson here, and something's being brought up to go back, into this lesson and learn, and or re-problem solve through it and learn in a different way. Because that's a huge thing that, um, we talk about in the native is a circle of life. Here in life, we're always going around in the circle of life lessons. And even though you may learn one lesson, you'll probably come back around to it. And it's like with me with the lesson of the narcissist. I once thought that because I got out of my marriage and ended the narcissist relationship and got rid of the narcissist, and I was like, yes, I learned the lesson of the narcissist. I freed myself. I don't have to deal with narcissist again. And then all of a sudden, boom, I end up encountering with a narcissistic model that I was working with for a while, and she ended up flipping on me. And then I had to approach that and take the lessons from my marriage of the narcissist and apply it to this, relationship with this friendship, and be able to handle that narcissism in a new way. Because now I had to take the lessons that I had learned from the previous and now apply them to the now. And then we, we went separate ways. But then I again was like, all right, I'm free from the narcissist. But then all of a sudden more start showing up here and there. And so my point is that in life we keep going through lessons, but we may come around to the same lesson again. But at the same time, are you growing from that lesson? And when you get challenged with that lesson again, sometimes you get challenged to see if you really did grow. So I'm going to leave that with for today. So, you know, I think I'll just go through these things real quick. So important things is, key pointers is being vulnerable, transparent, having no expectations, no judgment, having that respect for one another, having an open mind, work on, having that active listening, self-awareness, and then also focusing and having that eye contact in conversations, turning your phones off, putting your phones down when you're having conversations with people. And it's not just a relationship, it's with anybody. Actively engage, knowing your triggers, and then having the ability to say sorry from your heart, and then also forgiving on the other end. So we'll leave that with you for today. And then if you want to get caught up, go to Straight Couch Podcast, our page, and you can watch the videos on there to get caught up. Then, or go to YouTube, Anchor FM, and look up Straight Couch Talk Podcast. And we will see you on the other side. See you later.
Bye.
Have a good one.